Welcome to Sports Cards once again. One of the things I've always loved about sports cards is the feeling that you're holding a little piece of history, condensed into a little cardboard rectangle. But to really appreciate the historical significance of this hobby, it's necessary to go back in time, to a time long, long ago. In this video, we're going to take a look at the roots of the sports card collecting hobby from the earliest days of its existence. The early history of sports card collecting is deeply intertwined with the early history of baseball. As far back as the time of the American Revolution, children on American schoolyards were playing variations of a game influenced by two popular British games, rounders and cricket. Gradually over time, these schoolyard games began to become more and more popular, though the particular rules for the game varied greatly from place to place. As the first industrialized cities were being formed in America, these games became a popular activity even among adults, who were looking for an escape from their grueling, labor-intensive factory jobs. Then, in September of 1845, a group of men in New York City founded the New York Knickerbocker Baseball Club. And in that process, a new set of rules was written that would become the foundation upon which modern-day baseball was formed. The shape of a baseball diamond emerged from these new rules, as well as foul lines and the 3 strikes and you're out rule, and a number of other new structural elements. With this new set of rules, the game was no longer just a fun schoolyard pastime. It had broken from its roots in cricket and rounders and was coming into its own as its own independent and fully fledged sport. Then, throughout the 1840s and 1850s, baseball teams were formed in different corners of the United States, with many amateur leagues becoming vibrant and popular pastimes for players and for fans. Into the 1860s, some of these amateur teams were secretly paying some of the best players of the sport so that their team would be better than others. But this was pretty much just under the table, as it was not yet a professional sport, and many people frowned on the idea of paying people to play a game that everyone just wanted to play as a fun pastime, feeling it gave unfair advantage to those who would fork out the dough. But this was really the first time that people began to become aware that there was space here for a professional sports league. And towards the end of the 1860s, the first professional baseball leagues began to be formed. Watching as this sport took deeper and deeper roots, and observing the introduction of money into the equation, must have set off some light bulbs in the minds of a lot of business and advertisement men at the time. And with a light bulb idea, the cigarette industry, in response to this new popular professional sport, came up with a marketing campaign.
What are all the cigarettes for? Are you heading on a long journey or something?
No, nothing like that at all. I'm just interested in the cards.
Okay.
The cigarette cards. Oh, you got any?
No.
No, what's the matter with you? These things are enormously valuable.
What, a little picture card?
Yes, enormously. Sometimes I'll smoke up to 200 cigarettes in one day, just so I can keep opening the packs. I wish I could explain to you the pleasure and the pain I get out of collecting these babies.
Sure. It sounds,
Thrilling? Yeah, it is. Not to mention the vast amounts of life-reaffirming cigarettes I get to smoke. Oh, and the amount of money? A veritable fortune, sir.
Fortune?
Oh, sure. A complete set of any series is worth a fortune, yeah.
Inside packs of cigarettes, stiff cardboard rectangles were placed to stiffen the sides of the cigarette pack to prevent the cancer sticks from getting crushed. Well, cigarette companies decided to make these cardboard rectangles more interesting by turning them into advertising cards and highlighting pictures and players of this newly popular sport of baseball. Candy companies began to do something very similar, until it became common for most cigarette and candy products to include these cool new cards. This picture here is a pre-Civil War 1860 baseball card of the Brooklyn Atlantic's amateur baseball team. In the 1870s, with the development of new printing technologies that allowed for multicolor printing, these cards only became more popular. Many different kinds of companies were now inserting different kinds of cards into their products, sometimes with baseball-related content, and sometimes with other content made for entertainment or comedy or interesting information, depending on whatever the companies thought would be of interest to their customers. Suddenly, cards of all sorts were everywhere. So here in the 1870s is when a lot of people began to take on card collecting as a hobby. People would collect and store cards in scrapbooks, and they would trade cards with other collectors to complete sets, which is where the emergence of the name trading card originates. And this is where it all begins. Over the next several decades, this new trading card hobby continued to have a life and a community, although it was a pretty niche hobby, but the hobby continued to be passed down from generation to generation. And then, in 1938, a new company was founded that will become incredibly important to this story. This company had its roots in the American Leaf Tobacco Company that had been founded in 1890. During World War I, American Leaf Tobacco was cut off from a lot of its tobacco supply, which they had sourced mostly from Turkey, so they had to diversify their business in order to continue to exist. American Leaf Tobacco transformed themselves into a chewing gum company, calling themselves Tops. At the time of the birth of Tops, chewing gum was a novelty. It existed, but it wasn't common. But Tops would change all that. With its Bazooka bubblegum product, which included a small comic on every gum wrapper, Tops made gum incredibly popular. Then, in 1950, in order to increase their gum sales, Tops decided to package trading cards together with their products. Their early trading card efforts were more focused on the world of entertainment, television stars, movie stars, musicians. But once they shifted their focus more and more towards baseball cards, that's when the trend really began to take off. The 1952 trading cards that Tops produced are today considered the grandfather of all sports cards. These cards include player biographies and statistics, and in many core ways deeply resemble the sports cards of today. This is also the set where can be found one of the most iconic sports cards in all of history, the rookie card of Mickey Mantle, which in early 2021 sold for a record $5.2 million. However, despite the ridiculous value of some of these cards now, at the time of their production, they were not considered monetarily valuable at all. Kids collected baseball cards to stuff into the spokes of their bicycle wheels or to stuff into the bottom of a drawer and be long forgotten. Parents would throw out boxes of cards that their children no longer seemed to have much interest in. But in the 1980s, something began to change. Suddenly, sports cards began to be seen as something more than just a fun little hobby. They began to be viewed as valuable collectibles, and people began to spend much bigger money collecting cards. The emergence of the 1986 Fleer basketball card set, which includes the iconic Michael Jordan rookie card, was in many ways the source of this new surge in sports cards' popularity. Sports cards suddenly became mainstream. With this increasing demand comes an increase in production. But this time around, people who begin collecting cards have learned one important thing from the earlier stages of sports card collecting, and that is, don't throw out your cards. Companies begin to produce incredible numbers of cards, and collectors this time around are much more careful to actually keep them in good condition. And more than anything, this combination of overproduction and collectors keeping their cards nice is why today's cards from this junk wax era of sports cards are usually worth quite little. They're still everywhere, in everyone's parents' attics, basements, and closets, oftentimes kept in pretty good condition. Sports card companies learned from the experience of the junk wax era, and nowadays the existence of serial numbered and short printed cards are a direct result of the path that came before. In fact, almost any modern trend in the sports card hobby that exists likely has some sort of root somewhere along this historical path that I've outlined here. I find this fascinating, both as a collector and just as someone interested in history, and I hope you have found this video interesting too. Please do subscribe to the channel for lots of sports card related content. Peace.